Like I said, thanks for being here today. I wanted to start with something personal, something I wish I never had to share, but it's the reason I'm standing here. This is about a blind spot that exists in almost every organization, one that's quietly affecting 1 in 4 working parents. And let me tell you about my daughter, Maddie. So before we lost Maddie, this is Maddie, there were signs I just didn't see that for what they were. She attempted suicide twice, once in December 2014 and again in January 2015. She spent 10 days in the youth psychiatric ward the first time and 2 months the second. For over 4 months, we were at the hospital every single day, trying to navigate a system that felt endless and broken. And I was in constant anxiety mode. My head was always on a swivel, and when your child struggles, the parent struggles too. And so my business suffered, my savings, I blew through all my savings. But the hardest part was that Maddie asked us to keep it quiet. She didn't want anyone to know why she was in the hospital, so her friends didn't know. And I've thought about that fact ever since. If her friends had known, maybe they could have helped support her. So I could barely work because I could barely think. And then on April 11th, 2015, we lost her. When that happened, my anxiety lifted, but what replaced it was far worse. Grief that felt like being trapped underwater. For almost 10 years, I struggled to find a way forward. And here's the reality. The 6 bereavement days you get from work do nothing. When something like this happens, your world flips upside down. Nothing makes sense. You're not the same person anymore. We like to think our kids are resilient, that they can handle things like divorce and bullying, school pressure, social media, but many can't because they've never been taught how to process emotions like grief and sadness and depression. And when they can't talk about it, they carry shame. Here's what I learned later. Traumatic grief doesn't just break your heart. It changes your brain. When trauma hits, the part of your brain that helps you focus and plan, the prefrontal cortex, basically it shuts down. The amygdala, the fear center of our brain, it takes over. So you're in survival mode all the time. You forget things, you can't focus, you can't make decisions, you're on complete edge. From the outside, you might look distracted or careless, but inside, your brain is doing whatever it can do to protect you. And this is what's happening for many parents right now. They haven't lost their child, but they're terrified they might. They're constantly scanning for danger. They show up to work, but part of them is somewhere else entirely. 1 in 4 working parents have a child struggling with their mental health. And for example, if your company has 400 employees, that translates into about 75 of them are quietly trying to hold their family together right now. That pain doesn't stay at home. It follows them into work. They're tired, they're distracted, and emotionally drained. And they hide it out of fear and out of shame. When that happens, absenteeism rises, productivity drops, turnover increases. And worse, employees start to believe this. We care about you from 9 to 5, but after that, you're on your own. That's the blind spot in business today. If we say we're employee centric, this is where that belief is truly tested. After Maddie died, I started to write about what we went through. It was painful, but it helped me breathe again. When I shared my writing on social media, I was flooded with direct messages from parents. They thanked me for speaking out because they were living the same nightmare. They're scared, they're ashamed, they're desperate, and terribly alone. They didn't know where to go or who to talk to. And they were right. The system is still confusing, even 10 years after we lost Maddie. Still confusing, still broken. Getting a diagnosis can take months. And at the time, I helped run a not-for-profit teaching kids how to identify and talk about their emotions. Many of these kids said the program, it changed their lives. But when we tried to bring it into more schools, most said no, they already had their programs. But 95% of the students that went through our program said the school programs that they had at school were completely ineffective. And that's when I knew something had to change. That's when the idea for the MentorWell began. At the MentorWell, we start by helping parents. We run online lunch and learns to educate parents before a crisis hits. We show them what to look for. Changes in their mood, withdrawal, irritability, sleep patterns, the little red flags that are really easy to miss. And we give them simple ways to talk to their kids, how to listen without judgment and build trust. We teach emotional intelligence because that's the foundation for connection. And I always say, parents love it. Parents, as soon as a child starts to open up and share, parents jump into fix-it mode, and kids shut down because kids just want a non-judgmental person to listen to them, not to give them advice all the time. So if mentorship isn't enough, we connect families with trusted clinical partners. So if someone is further down that path, it's still challenging. You still have to navigate the medical system. You have to go to your GP and get a referral, and you're limited by the referral of your doctor and their network of mental health practitioners. It's not perfect. And I can't help thinking if Maddie had a mentor who'd been through something like a painful divorce or moving homes or schools, someone who came out okay, and it might have made a difference. And that's what the MentorWell does. We match teens and young adults with mentors who've walked through the storm and found their way back. Someone who listens, not lectures, someone who understands because they've lived it. So when companies ignore this, the cost is huge. I've met parents who've had to leave their jobs to be closer to a struggling child. Some have to move to different cities or provinces if their kids are in university. Some drain their savings waiting for help that never come. For businesses, that means lost productivity, disengagement, higher benefit claims, and turnover. And for parents, it means guilt, exhaustion, and fear that never lets up. So if 1 in 4 of your employees are living this right now, can you really afford to do nothing? So when companies invest in prevention, when they show they care about people, not just performance, everything changes. Productivity rises, retention improves, people feel safe. And that's not just emotional, it's neurological. When we feel supported, the brain releases oxytocin and serotonin, chemicals that improve focus, trust, and calm. Empathy literally heals the brain. It's not a perk, it's good business. Because when people feel safe, they give you their best. So if I could go back, I'd give anything to have known what I know now. But I can't. None of us can. What we can do is make sure fewer parents ever live this story. You, as leaders, have that power. You can create a culture that sees people as whole, not just employees, but parents, partners, and human beings. You can bring programs like this into your organization to help families before it's too late. Because behind every title is someone trying to hold their family together. And sometimes all they need is to know their workplace sees them. This is Maddie. She's why I do this. My hope that her story helps even one family catch the signs earlier, ask for help sooner, and find support faster. Because that's what legacy really means, using your pain to make sure someone else doesn't have to live it. So thank you for listening, and thank you for caring. And if this resonated with you, please reach out. You can contact me directly at chris@thementorwell.com or visit thementorwell.com, our website. We have our first 10 mentors on board. We had a training session earlier this week. I've got another one tonight. And this is exactly what your employees and their families need right now as we're trying to navigate this mental health epidemic. So I'd love to talk to you about how we can help your organization take care of the people who are taking care of you. So now, if you have questions, I'd love to be able to bring it just to have an open Q&A. And just please unmute yourself if you have any questions.
Hey, Chris, I have just some comments and stuff, and great job presenting this. Obviously, this is a massive issue, but there are opportunities in here for organizations like yourselves or ours to fill that void or that gap in the market today to improve human flourishing, as I like to say. There's 909 good people every day in the United States die from the deaths of despair, alcohol, suicide, and overdose. You got to think about that for a minute. 909. So just in the time you did your presentation, about 25, 30 families got the phone call that we've received. And, I think the attention often goes to the deaths, but the reality is you don't have to have a death in a family to have destruction and devastation. The collateral damage in a family structure that carries over to work, carries over to sports teams the kids are on, carries over to the neighborhood. I mean, it's very destructive. And I think, again, just proud to have you as a friend and as a mentor of mine. And I wanted to just throw something out too about youth today and why this is such an important issue. Gen Z right now is about a third of the world's population. So 14 to 26 roughly is Gen Z, 2.56 billion humans on the planet, the largest generation in human history. They're also, Chris, and you and I have talked about this, the first generation ever to have mental health, mental wellness be their number one New Year's resolution. So that tells you something. The largest demographic ever, the first one ever to have a heightened sense of improving their lives. From a work environment, which is what you're a little bit alluding here too, they've already replaced boomers in the workplace. And in 7 to 10 years, Gen Z will replace millennials and Gen Xers in the workplace. So if you're talking to employers about this impending doom, this tidal wave coming, there's two sides to this fence. One, they can't avoid it. It won't be long. They'll look across their cubicles and across their offices, and they're all going to be today's 18 to 26-year-olds are all going to be working in the workplace very shortly. And they're also telling you in advance that they need programs like MentorWell or Brighton or any resource. And I like to say when I'm talking to people about the quote that Desmond Tutu said, and I know you and I are very much aligned in this, when he said, at some point, we need to stop pulling people out of the river, move further upstream, and find out why they're falling in the first place. So I think it's easy for us as parents and as, people to be talking about the symptoms and the problems, but you and I are very, very much aligned in that we want to move further upstream and figure out, what drives a Maddie or a Seth or anybody to make the choices that they made or the decisions that they made. And the challenge is we live in 60-second attention spans. Actually, the average attention span in the United States is 47.5 seconds. So it takes 66 days for a behavior to become a habit. That's the challenge, is we're dealing with minds that are constantly looking at TikTok and Instagram, and they don't understand that you have to put the effort in, you have to put the work in, and not just one day or 1 week, but for 2 months consecutively. So as parents, as business people, these are some of the challenges we have ahead of us. And I again, applaud what you do, and anybody that, it's great what you're doing, Chris, with the pain and suffering that you've had.
Well, I think we both are motivated. We're transforming our pain into purpose with what you've done with Brighton. So it's having gone through and lived what we've gone through. We have a very unique perspective, not an enviable one. So it's incredibly. It's such an incredibly vast issue right now. And the interesting thing within, and if we have some HR, I know Trisha, if we have some HR people on the call, I'm just wondering, are there any metrics or KPIs that you have in place that kind of measures any of this stuff? Or is it on a lot of companies' radars? Or is it just one of those things that there's only so much we can do and provide for our employees? The interesting thing about mentorship, because we are upstream, we have the ability to get ahead of the most significant part of the cost, which is remediation. And it's not only just the cost, it's the time, it is the productivity loss, and it impacts your bottom line exponentially more than putting a mentorship program in place. And just what it does from a peace of mind standpoint for parents and how to navigate it. It is a very lonely world when someone is dealing with a struggling child and they don't know where they can go because mental health resources aren't always adequate. They're not. The single largest question I get asked by parents who reach out to me is, where do I go? I don't know where to go. What are the resources available? And that's the challenge. And if it takes often weeks and months to actually get a diagnosis and then start treatment, and I'm not sure what the numbers are in the States, Jeff, but as far as you can wait six plus months depending upon the specialization that you require to get a proper diagnosis and then get into treatment. And that's after, if you find the right practitioner out of the gate. Often it takes a couple of different attempts to be able to find that. So
it is definitely. Oh, go ahead, Deborah. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm actually going to come off of, so you can't see me, but I will say that I am not in Zoom mode. I'm in the midst of moving. I'm not in my home office, so just bear with me.
Okay, no problem.
I don't even think you can see me. Maybe you can.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yep.
There's so much that I would like to say. I could probably spend 2 hours with you, Chris, and you, Jeffrey, and Mark as well, talking about this. But let me just say a couple quick things. One of the issues in the workplace is fear of self-disclosure.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a former HR director, and I left my job as an HR director after my son was diagnosed as neurodivergent. Now, I was at a director level, so I had more flexibility, let's say, to be able to do what needed to be done, but it was way too much. And when I disclosed the situation to my boss, the response was, "When will this be over?"
Wow.
And I say that when I speak because I want parents and HR people and benefits leaders and EAPs to understand that when you're talking about neurodivergence, mental health, autism, anything that falls into this domain, it's not a question of when is it going to be over. It's a question of what can we do to help you.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And the self-disclosure piece is real. My former company, which I had a few years ago, was called Education Navigation. And what we were doing is we were providing individual coaching to parents to help them navigate through the complexities of school. And one of the things that we heard when we were doing research was, we don't tell anyone. We don't tell our boss. We don't tell a colleague. We don't share it. Well, even when you've got ERGs, employee resource groups for parents, mental health related or anything, it's a very small group. And unless you're bringing in leaders, unless you're bringing in managers, unless you're bringing in the people who have the ability to make decisions and change or increase policies, it's like we're all talking to each other.
Yeah.
And it doesn't expand the knowledge base. So I hope you don't mind. I didn't mean to take over, but
No. That's the purpose of this. I love it. Thank you for sharing.
And I just want to chime in, if that's okay, Deborah. Thanks for bringing that up, because we meet routinely with HR people, and I remember doing a pilot with a school a couple of years ago when we launched, and like 57% of and this is a pretty large school here in Iowa, 57% of the teachers that attended this like 2-day session on mental health and stuff, during the surveys we sent out, 57% of them said they did not want to have conversations about student mental health with the students for a number of reasons: school shootings, kid going home hanging themselves because you said just toughen up. Like, I grew up in the world where Bobby Knight was a mentor. You just pulled up your shoes and you went out and played basketball. And I grew up with 3 brothers, and you toughened up, or you fell behind. And you can't do that today. It's a lot more sensitive. And that is one of the problems, is this coddling of our youth today. And it goes back to parenting and overprotecting and not letting kids actually fall and get hurt anymore. It's not building much resilience. And Gen Z, even though they're large, they're one of the least resilient generations of all time. Again, that's not their fault. They just grew up with things that we didn't grow up with. And most of what they're struggling with are adult inventions like social media and TikTok. And, these are issues that we created. And I think we have a sense of obligation to kind of redirect them. But I was going to say, one of the challenges we're finding is the dynamic of ROI, because there's a lot of talk about ROI. And we know, as mental health advocates, that mental health isn't linear. It isn't really quantifiable. And so to take an industry that looks at numbers and, ROIs and all this stuff, month over month growths and all this, and then putting in a qualitative aspect of say the nonlinear aspect of mental health, that's a very tough challenge for us as advocates, especially us as startup founders and CEOs that are trying to contribute a solution. We're bucking heads with employers that say, unless you can show me $1 in creates $4 out, we're not interested. And that to me is just the comment you mentioned about your son or daughter. I don't remember if you said
my son.
It's just, that just infuriates me. I don't know if I'd have the patience. If someone would have said that to me, I probably would have just went ballistic on them, because that's the problem, is that we can't normalize things today. We have to pathologize, and every kid can't be sad, they're depressed. Every kid can't be excited or anxious, they have to have anxiety. And so this name it, attainment mindset that our Western medicine has come to, I think, has caused a lot of problems, because this individual obviously thought this was something you just conquer. You're just going to wake up and be at the summit saying, I won this fight and my son's not neurodivergent. It's like bullshit. It's like, and plus it's not a curse or a disease or a problem. It's who they are. And
Yeah.
it can be loved and nurtured and actually be used to a superpower for them.
And you know what's interesting, Jeffrey? I'm really glad you said it just the way you said it, because when he said that to me, that was the pivotal point where I knew I was leaving this job.
Yeah.
It
Oh,
didn't matter.
amen. I
It
would
didn't,
too. I'd follow you
nothing
out the
else,
door.
right? Nothing else
Yep.
mattered because I thought I wanted to say, this is not a broken arm
Right.
where
Yeah.
we put on a cast
Right.
and then in 8 weeks, the cast comes off.
Right.
It was the lack of understanding. The other thing I wanted to just quickly add, if I may, is there's so many assumptions made when you say the term mental health.
Yeah.
People go to places that are not based in fact. In fact, there was something that was just, I posted on LinkedIn about it a day or two ago, just about autism being a disease. It's not a disease.
Right.
And unless we get that verbiage correct, and unless we truly understand what we're talking about, we're going to continue in this kind of, rat's circle thingy where we're not going to be able to break out. And I also think that from an HR and a benefits standpoint, education is key, absolutely key, because yes, I know the ROI and all of it, but that doesn't matter because just as Chris said, we're talking about humanity. We're
Mm.
talking about people. We're talking about people who have hearts and souls and guts and lives. And so you can't always, it's really difficult. And I'm sure everyone on the call agrees. It's really difficult sometimes to be able to communicate something where you're not looking at, show me the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, you're saying, show me what we're doing to improve a life.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris, you said it so perfectly. When your child is struggling, you're struggling 10
Yeah.
times more. I mean, the numbers of nights where I stood over my son's bed at 2 a.m. thinking, I don't think I can do this. I don't think we can do this. But that's not seen in the workplace.
To your point too, Deborah, the education piece, originally when I kind of set out on this journey, I thought, okay, you know what? If we just talk about mentorship, then the challenge becomes parents for the most part chalk up a lot of this stuff to teenage behavior or to hormones. So getting ahead of it and actually being able to educate parents on what should they be looking for, what are
Mhm.
behaviors that actually are cause for concern, or at least to have your radar on. And that's where I kind of revisit and I said, if we don't wrap an education piece around this, it's not only just the education aspect of things, it's creating resources
Mhm.
that people can access, whether they want to access them directly or if they go through their HR person, or it's a portal. Once again, the stigma still exists. 10 years after I lost Maddie, it's oops. Is everything okay? Does anyone else hear that? But as far as the education piece is absolutely critical.
Mhm.
And the resources, because the stigma exists as much as it still does, there are still people, even if they are in what their employers deem an employee-centric environment, they don't want to test that theory. They want it's one thing to actually say, listen, I'm dealing with this, and then to go tell your boss, and based upon what you said, when you went to your boss, Deborah, and talked to him about your son, I'm sorry, but that is exactly the reason why people hide in shame and people stay behind the curtain, because they're afraid of being isolated and being basically said, okay, let's watch Deborah. If she's cutting out early, we want to make sure that
Mhm.
he's making up that time, right? So it's
And the truth is, Chris, it also, because it was communicated beyond this confidential conversation, there were other people who were aware. And it became, I started to feel those barriers. And the other thing I'm going to say, and then I promise I will shut up. The thing that you said about the wait times, I get emails from parents so many times a week. Their child is in crisis. They're in the ER. They don't have a psychiatrist on staff. Where are they supposed to go? They said they're being released in 12 hours. There's so much in terms of, as you said, securing a diagnosis and understanding what it means in real time and in real terms. What does this actually look like? What are we supposed to be doing in terms of steps? With all, because there's such a lack of mental health professionals. Yes, they're there, and I know about the startups. I'm involved with them just like you are, that are bringing mental health services into the workplace. When you've got a kid in crisis, you don't really give a damn about, I'm going to log on and then hopefully you need somebody now. You need a response or support now. And the reality is so many parents can't secure it.
Well, and I think so many people who may have tried going through the EAP route only to find out that, you know what, that's like counseling very light.
You're right. Right.
We're very ineffective. Most people I've talked, and I was talking earlier this week about it, and that's why there's a utilization rate of EAPs of less than 5%, because they don't feel that there's really any benefit to it. The people on the other side of the screen aren't experts. They're not necessarily counselors. So that's why, to Jeff's point, getting ahead of it, going way upstream, identifying how can we get ahead of it? What can we do? And it does start with education, and it starts with compassion. And
yes.
I bet you anything, if your boss back at your old job had a child who had gone through and experienced a mental health challenge, that would have probably give him a much different perspective, a much more empathetic one. Unfortunately, and back when I was growing up, it was very, very rare to have heard about anyone who had had a mental health challenge, or let alone had attempted suicide or had suicided. So it's unfortunately our demographics today, there are very few people that can say that they haven't had their life impacted by suicide or mental health in some capacity or another.
Agreed. I'm going to mute myself now because I can just feel myself just continuing to talk.
I'm in the same boat. I want Mark and Jennifer and Tricia because I feel like I could just jump in too. And I will say a quick thing, then I'll shut mine off too. That I think a lot of it goes back to how we are presenting this as a fear and scarcity mindset from parents and from kids versus a love and abundance. So in other words, if we can shift the narrative and stop talking about, oh, don't touch the stove, it's hot, just trying to scare people to change behavior, but more about, here are the reasons why life is beautiful. Here are the reasons why gratitude is a great practice every day, and focus on empowerment. I've always said there's two ways to change behavior. You scare people, don't do drugs, you'll die, or you inspire them. And that's really the two ways. One is very short-term and authentic. The other is more authentic and long-term. And I think our initiative at Brighton is to focus on empowerment and less judgment, less labels, and accept your differences of other people as strengths. And so maybe you're a little hyper, someone isn't. Well, I have attention deficit, never been diagnosed, but my dad used to tell me, little Jeffy, you can only take it out of kids, you can't put it in them. Be grateful that you have it. And so I grew up, my dad was a doctor, by the way, and Ritalin was prescribed in 1990. I think there was 600,000 prescription stimulants to adolescents. And in 21 years, it was 3.7 million. So it's like, there's a lot of culpability to go around, but I know witnessing it like you did, Chris, the death of my son and then the death of my wife from alcohol and overdose, and sitting in my closet with a gun to my head. My family in a 5-year block of time could have lost a dad, a mom, and a brother on the 3 separate deaths of despair: overdose, alcohol, and suicide. And that would have been in and of itself unacceptable for me. And obviously I didn't pull the trigger, but there's a sense of respect when you're that close to ending your life and you don't. There's a great lesson in that. And I don't fear those moments. And if anything, I get strength and power from my pain and suffering. But it took me 8 long years, and Maddie's been gone, I think, in 14. Seth died in 16, and my wife died in 21. But there's something in that, some data in there that we can extrapolate and either help ourselves or share with humanity. And it sucks to have to go through it, but I think Seth, Maddie, and Prudence would die in vain if we didn't continue what we're doing. So, and that's just not acceptable on my watch, and I know it isn't on Chris's either.
No, absolutely. And that's why, going back to your point about empowerment, and that's why I believe so adamantly in mentorship, especially when you mirror a child or a young person with someone who's gone through similar relatable events, just knowing that they have the resilience to be able to get through this. But success leaves clues, and we don't know that. In that moment, sometimes we feel desperate. And the important thing to remember is there is someone else who has gone through that exact same challenge that you have, but being able to identify and be able to find that person and connect that person is the challenge. And so I mentioned I have 10 mentors who I'm training this week, and everyone comes from a place of kindness. Everyone comes from a place of empathy. They just want to share how they got through that moment in time, and to be able to offer coping strategies, or just sit and listen and appreciate what that person's going through, because they had gone through it and they came through the other side. And I'm always amazed at the mentors. And Mark is going to be a mentor. It's people who want to make a difference, people who just know what our youth are experiencing, and they just want to help. Because if we just leave it up to the government or to our school systems, guess what? Nothing's going to happen. So we have to take it upon ourselves, those with lived experiences, those with some devastating effects upon how they've managed to move through life in spite of all of these losses, and still see hope. And still, our goal isn't just to have kids who being stuck really sucks as a kid. Our goal isn't just to have them stuck. We want them to flourish, because to do anything less than that is it's not fair.
You know, Chris, there's an old saying, you are exactly where you need to be at this moment in your life. And I think this narrative of being stuck is even could be improved on, because you're never stuck, because you're always in a position of transition. You're always in a position of evolution. So stuck implies that there's a time in your life when you're not stuck. I think every day, all of us on this call, we're stuck in something, and it's not abnormal to be in a breakup, or to be having financial problems, or to be going through puberty or anything like that. These aren't abnormal. These are perfectly normal things. And so if we can normalize this conversation, that really nobody is really stuck. They just have challenges in front of them. They have things of barriers to wherever they're trying to go, but look at it as part of the process. I mean, look at it as any growth pains is, because once you get unstuck, where do you end up getting again? Stuck.
Yeah.
So it's setting yourself up for unrealistic expectations. I think you're ever going to get unstuck. You put out one fire, 2 more come up. You know, I thought losing my son was like, that was the worst case scenario. Then 5 years later, lose my wife. And I'm ready for that. I'm preparing myself. I'm always 5 seconds away from my phone ringing again, and somebody else I love passed away. And at our age, it's mathematically highly probable that those calls happen more frequently, not less. And with young adults, as they mature and get older, the likelihood of difficult things coming is highly enhanced. And so it's like going back to basics and teaching kids coping mechanisms. What you're feeling is not abnormal. Millions, if not billions of humans on the planet are going through the exact same feelings you're going through. But there is a way to get yourself to a better state of mind. And it may be meditation, exercise, watching your sugar intake, quitting vaping, quitting drinking, whatever it may be, that don't involve 2-week waits to see a therapist. Getting vitamin D from the sun, depending on where you live, maybe not in Toronto, but right now in Iowa, I could pop out here and it's 65 degrees. If I wanted to get 20 minutes of vitamin D, I could. I don't have to wait 2 weeks to go see my therapist. So
it just so you know, Jeff, it is beautiful in Toronto.
I'll have to come up and see you sometime. But it's like, I am encouraged that there are low cost ways, low barriers to entry to improve human flourishing. And one thing, and I do have to bolt here, but I'll throw it out there, is that even though there's a lot of criticisms about technology, and technology is the root of a lot of the problems we're at, one, it ain't going away. And you can blame it on the phones and stuff, but I think eventually we'll be doing things that make technology look pretty infant today. But like AI can be a tremendous advantage, a tremendous tool. And the speed of how fast this is evolving is overwhelming our small brains. We can't comprehend what AI is going to look like in a couple of years. And I'm really excited about the AI space when it comes to preventative mental wellness, not necessarily the telehealth and the treatment side, but in the preventative side, self-assessing, autonomous learning, journaling, mood tracking, ways that you can have your AI encrypted and protected, not like general AI out in the public where no idea where your information is going or even how the AI was trained. But I think AI can be a strategic tool here in this battle that we're in. And we got a long ways to go. There's hallucination issues. The lady in New York who had chat write her a suicide note for her parents. I mean, that just makes my stomach turn. But again, I think those are edge cases. Those are probably more outliers than they are the norm. The benefits people are getting from AI, at least the studies we're seeing coming in, there's more positive things going on. We had 50 million journal entries in our app last month. And the previous month, we had 25. So what that's telling me is that people are using AI tools that are trained correctly, that have guide rails, have parameters, have off ramps for help. The other AI out in the just normal chat, that's the wild, wild west. And I do fear about people that are putting their personal health information on chat or Claude that is not in an encrypted, protected element. That's just my 2 cents worth. And again, I fought this for a while and I just saw how AI was really coming to fruition. And I think, what is it now? 80% of teens are using AI for just normal questions about how to open a credit card, or, what is a credit score, or is it abnormal to have thoughts of suicide? I mean, they're going there. So we can either try to monitor or to control how that's used, or we can just fight it and say, I hope it goes away. I don't think the latter is a very good way to do that.
As long as it comes from a place of curiosity, right?
Yeah.
Curiosity is the thing that is going to be the catalyst to all of this, as opposed to it being a means to hurt or harm yourself. I agree with you wholeheartedly, Jeff. I think, AI is not going anywhere. Let's try to ensure that it is safeguarded for those who are using it. Because what's the numbers now that people are using for search options? Chat are using AI as opposed to Google anymore.
I'll say last thing, a cautionary tale. And the individual who got caught for starting the Palisades fire, do you know how they basically found him and actually gained evidence on him? His Chat GTP search history. Now, if that doesn't tell you right there that whatever you're putting on chat, at some point, if you just happen to ask a question about school shootings and and any intentions of shooting up a school, think about the implications of the information that you're trying to get. Or maybe you're working on a school project, or maybe you're trying to become a mentor and you're trying to put together a blog and you're researching data. One of the ways they caught this kid was he was researching how to start fires and get away with it and stuff. So it's like, that's good. I'm happy they did that, but you got to think about the big picture of this when you're putting all your information out there on chat. These are, and even school teachers are unaware of this as well. So a lot of education is needed. I'm learning at 59 every day on how this stuff works, but I'd love to connect with everybody on the call on LinkedIn. So if you want to reach out to me, that'd be great. I'm heading to another couple meetings here, but I love Chris to death. If I had the time right now, I would jump in and be a mentor. Maybe I could do that after the first of the year, Chris. But right now, I'm trying to close my round. I'm trying to raise money. So it's hard. That's a hard thing right now.
That's the thing about being an entrepreneur when we're almost 60, right?
Yeah. But better than being almost 80.
Anyway, being respectful of everyone's time. Jeff, thanks for coming. Good to see you.
Good luck to everybody.
Appreciate
nice
it.
meeting you all.
If anyone has any other questions, if not, we shall end the call. Thank you very much for participating, and really appreciate you coming on the call with me. And hopefully you see the benefits of what MentorWell is all about and its application. It's a unique application. I've have a lot of people who have said, Chris, this is what our world needs now. Just another resource for our young people, and that's really why I invented it. I didn't invent.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for your candor, for your honesty, for sharing your story. It takes courage. It takes heart. So, and I've shared this with you privately via LinkedIn messaging too. I appreciate just the opportunity to listen and say a few things as well.
No, thank you. Thank you, everyone. And if no one has anything else, enjoy the rest of your afternoon.